Here we are today with the Hyundai IONIQ 6 all-wheel drive. This is in ultimate trim. This one comes in at 55 grand, but they do start from about 47. Now it's not a saloon, it's not a coupe, it's a streamliner. That's what Hyundai are referring to this model as. Its looks raised a few eyebrows when it was first brought to market, and people do tend to seem to have quite an opinion on the way it looks, whether they kind of are completely in love with it or perhaps are not quite there yet. What's for sure is it stands out. It's an interesting looking thing. It's very different. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now this all-wheel drive dual motor version of the IONIQ 6 comes with 325 PS of power versus 228 in the rear wheel drive car. You can actually switch between those drivetrains via the options menu in there. So you've got two all-wheel drive options or a rear wheel drive option. This one's got a 0 to 62 time of 5.1 seconds, and although I haven't seen the top speed officially published anywhere, after a trip to the Autobahn in it on Wednesday, I can tell you that the top speed of this car is restricted to 120 miles an hour. Now, something fairly unique about this review is the fact that I've done over 1,000 miles in this particular car. I've actually taken it on a trip across Europe this week. I'll pop a link to that video at the end of this one. And to be honest, spoiler alert on this review, but this car's performed very, very well. I had heard a few things about efficiency in it. I mean, we've been driving in eco most of the time for the trip, and not driving particularly crazy apart from a aforementioned trip to Autobahn. But very few town miles, lots of motorway journeys. The car is very aerodynamic, but we were steadily averaging between 3.6 and 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour on the trip. And that gives you about 294 miles of real world range. So last night when I got home, I put the car on charge, got up to 100%, and it was telling me this morning that it had 293 miles of range. And obviously that figure is based on what it's been doing over the last few days. Now, when I collected the car on Monday at 100%, it told me it had 256 miles of range. So obviously it's going to vary a fair bit based on how you drive the car, the weather conditions and other factors. But for me, I think the efficiency is absolutely brilliant. Other thing I have to say is that whilst we were driving the car and looking at the next destination, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, oh, we're going to have a range of 200 miles when we arrive at the next destination, we were getting there to find we had 205 miles of range. So it was performing better than the estimated figures shown on the system. So I'm actually really, really impressed by the efficiency of this. It has been extremely warm. You know, we're not driving this in icy conditions. We're not in the middle of winter, and we've been having a bit of a heat wave. It's been 28 to 31 degrees everywhere we've been all week. So I'm sure that plays a part. But I think it's an important point to understand that this car can do it. So we've got 401 litres of boot space here in the back, and we've got another 14.5 litres in the front. In the single motor rear wheel drive version of this car, you get another 40 in the front. The boot size is actually really good. It goes back quite a long way, although it's obviously reasonably shallow because we've got this lid here. What could be better though is the opening we've got, because you know, it's not the widest, sort of tallest opening. And then once you get inside, you've also got the wheel arches to contend with. So if you're going on holiday with lots of luggage, you might find that it's a bit of a squeeze. For our road trip this week, it's been absolutely fine. I must also mention that there's a little bit of space under there to keep some charging cables as well. And that brings us on to this tail. What do we think of this, folks? Very Porsche in my eyes. This was the part of the car that I found most challenging when I first saw it, and it's become the part of the car that I'm most fond with now. You've got this 8-bit lighting everywhere, which is very kind of familiar to the IONIQ range. You've got these lights down here. I think it's a glorious thing. You stand on the brake pedal, you put it in reverse, and you've got a light show back here. This thing is epic. I love it. And it's not just the back of the car that gets that sort of unique and maybe slightly challenging styling. The front of this thing is very unique and it's full of character. You've got, again, those great kind of 8-bit style lights. Just look at this line here. It looks like it's straight out of the aviation industry, and how it's complemented here. if we go into the car and put the sunroof back, you'll see that line is replicated again with the sunroof. And all this, folks, is in the name of aerodynamism. Nothing about this car is by accident. Nothing about this car doesn't serve a purpose. Just look at that. Now I want to show you something else quite impressive. Bear in mind, I've just told you how many miles we've done in this car this week. You'd expect, if I ran my fingers along the wheel here, to find them absolutely caked in brake dust. Well, let's do that now. There you go. That's 1,000 miles worth of brake dust from a diamond cut alloy. That's impressive, folks. As is the case with the IONIQ 5, if you're childish, you can spend quite a lot of time doing this. So in the front here, folks, we've got this very familiar Kia Hyundai Group dual screen infotainment display. Really informative, really clear driver information display here, and then your sat nav, your media, everything else over here. Absolutely nothing wrong with that at all, but I'm not going to go on about it too much because we've seen it too many times before. We are going to plug the phone in, and we've got Apple CarPlay on here. It is wired Apple CarPlay and not wireless. You've also got wired Android Auto available to you. Loads of real estate, really works nice and well, not laggy in any way whatsoever. Now this car, as you will have seen, has got cameras instead of wing mirrors, and the picture comes up here either side. It actually gives you a much wider field of view than you would get with a standard glass mirror. But it does take some adjustment, because for quite a long time you look at the camera instead of the screen. I can tell you that adjustment time for me was about 100 miles, okay? And then it's kind of become second nature just to look there. Now the picture is not as good at night, or if you're in a really dark car park, because obviously it has to change its settings to try and brighten the image up for you. So it does appear to lose a little bit of resolution, and for you camera buffs out there, you'll know the term digital noise. You do get a little bit of that. Generally, they work very, very well. And in addition to those, of course, you've also got the blind spot cameras that come up on here to monitor your blind spot whenever you turn the indicator on, which we've seen on scores of Hyundai, Kias and Genesis cars. Down here, again, all very familiar. We've got the start-stop button. We've got a physical dial for the volume. We've got, although haptics, they are permanently there, controls for the aircon. All very easy to use, all very ergonomic. It all makes sense. Nothing's complicated. You know, you don't need to read a manual to get in this car and operate it. You just get in it and you think, this probably does that. And guess what? It does. How refreshing. Now the 2-spoke steering wheel's really comfortable and quite a nice thing. Got plenty of controls, but it's not overly fussy. This one, instead of having a Hyundai badge here, it's actually got 4 lights. And those lights give you all sorts of status indicators for the car. It's a little design gimmick really, but it's quite interesting, and I like interesting and new, and this car delivers lots of interesting and new, does it not? Down here you've got the window controls and your lock controls. They haven't put them on the door because the door has got this awesome, very ergonomic, very lovely long grab handle, similar to what we've seen in the IONIQ 5. You've got a nice long but fairly shallow door pocket down there, and your normal handles up here. One of the only parts of this interior that feels a little bit cheap actually is that grab handle. It would have been nice for that to be metal, and it's plastic. It feels like very expensive plastic, so cheap's not the best thing to say, but a little bit of aluminium there or something would have probably been nicer. The center console itself is fine. You've got 2 cup holders. You've got a USB-A here, which is the one you use for plugging in your phone. And it's also got a wireless charging pad on this one. And then in here, oh look, you've got high vis from my trip to France. You've got 2 USB-Cs and a little cubby. The glove box is actually a glove drawer, like we saw in the IONIQ 5. And you've got a really good field of vision in here, and this lovely big sunroof. The other thing to mention is, despite the fact we've got this long console here, there's no transmission tunnel. So underneath is plenty of space to maybe stick a rucksack, lots of storage there, and it's all reasonably discreet from people looking in from the outside. It's really well designed, this cabin, very well designed. Difficult to fault really. Now, apart from last night when I charged this on my wall box at home for the first time, we've been using Ionity chargers, and it's been brilliant actually. Every time we've turned up an IONIQ charger, there's been one available. Several times there have been 4 IONIQ chargers and we've turned up and they're all empty, or there's just been one car in there. They've all been available, they've all worked, and we've got a really fast charge at all of them. Now this car's built on 800 volt architecture, and if you put it onto a 350 kilowatt charger, it can actually take you from 10% to 80% in just 18 minutes, which is incredibly impressive. If you're on a 50 kilowatt charger, that's going to take you 73 minutes. I think the lowest point we charged the battery at was about 20%. And at that rate on an IONIQ charger, it was just flying up. It was going up 1% literally every few seconds. And as usual, it's just when you get to the top end of the charge that things start to slow up. But this car is probably the fastest charging car I've seen to date. It was mega impressive. Now in the back of this car is quite a place to be, folks. It's just, ooh, so relaxing. It's a lovely place to sit. The only slight gripe I've got is there's not a great deal of space to put your feet under the seat. Obviously the batteries are under the floor, which is the reason for that. You've got 2 USBs down here, USB-Cs that is, and a couple of air vents. You've also got control so you can move the passenger seat if it's getting in your way as a rear passenger. Tons of leg room, obviously no transmission tunnel, which means you can really spread yourself out. You've got lots of leg room. You've got headroom. Obviously this car slopes down at the back a bit like a coupe, but it's not a coupe, it's a streamliner. So if you were over 6 foot, you probably need to slide yourself down in this very comfortable seat a bit further. Sorry about that, must silence my phone in future. Great ambient lighting. You've got these lovely long grab handles. You've got a little cubby there, quite a decent door pocket down there, and a storage net down there. 2 cup holders here. Whew. It's a nice place to sit. So what's the car actually like to drive? Well, I've actually had some wheel time with one of these before this week when I went to the launch event, and I was instantly impressed with it. And one of the things I mentioned in that video, if you saw it, is just how different this car feels to drive to the IONIQ 5, because the motors and the battery are exactly the same in the 2 cars. So if you think, well, the running gear is the same, they should feel more or less the same. They don't. This feels much more engaging. The IONIQ 5 is a lovely thing to drive, but it feels more of a family car. But although this is still massively comfortable, it feels like it wants to play a little bit when you get into the twisty stuff. It's really quite engaging. It honestly is a great thing to drive, and great fun to drive, which is something that EVs are not always guilty of being, is fun. Despite the fact that we're on fly-by-wire steering in this car, it feels much more like a car with good old-fashioned mechanical steering, but in a good way. Not every car has this feel to it, but they've nailed it with this. It really feels like you're directly connected to the wheels and you can put the car wherever you want. The suspension, although is probably on the slightly firmer side, it's not harsh at all. It's that perfect balance between being good fun in corners and keeping you nice and planted and remaining comfortable. It's great. There's something about this car where it just feels effortless. Everything about it feels effortless, and it must have taken Hyundai a hell of a lot of effort to make that happen. Obviously it doesn't happen by accident. This is such a good piece of design. Everything about the car is just easy. I mean, I love it. The IONIQ 6, if you weren't aware, was actually given the World Car of the Year award for 2023, and I can see exactly why, because it's a stunning car. Folks, this is the best EV that I've driven to date. Not one of the best, it's the very best. It does everything, and it does everything well. It's not perfect. I've told you the things I don't like about the car, but there's so much I do like about the car, and so much where it just excels. You know, if you had to award it a score out of 10 for this, for that, you'd give it a 10. It's brilliant. There are no perfect cars in the world, whether they're petrol or diesel or they run on batteries or methane, folks. But this one is very, very special. This is a piece of kit. This will get company car drivers out of their 3 Series and out of their 5 Series, and they'll be happy to do it. Some of those people that moved over to a Tesla and just felt like they were missing something, despite the fact that Tesla's packed with technology and everything else, this will make that person happy. That person that's used to their C-Class or their E-Class, they're used to their A4 or their A6 or their 3 Series or their 5 Series. They'll get into this and be, oh, ooh, ooh. It surprises people, this car. It surprises people a lot. It's an epic thing. Would I buy one? Absolutely no way. I'd lease one, and I'd use my link to Lease Loco, which is in the video description, and it's pinned as the top comment. By using that link, it will take you to all the latest deals available on the IONIQ 6. Come back to it, because deals change all the time, and every time you click on it, you'll see the best deals available on the time that you click. Folks, I don't think I've ever done this before, but I'm currently sitting at Bournemouth Station waiting to pick up the driver who's going to take this away, and I'm gutted. I feel like a genuine feeling of loss, like I'm really going to miss this thing that's now going. It's only a car, but it's a very, very special car, and I've absolutely loved every minute I've spent with it. Please follow me on social media. Those of you that do follow me on other social media formats will have already seen quite a bit of the detail of my road trip that I've done in this vehicle with Tom Shorrock from Total Car Reviews. If you haven't seen that video yet, go and check it out right now. 5 countries in 1 day in this very car. And did we have a disaster? Oof. You'll have to watch to find out. Thanks again for watching, folks. See you soon.